Thank you very much, colleagues and Chair, for affording me this opportunity, and special thanks to the unit for putting nicely together this, engagement. This is quite interesting from one speaker to the next as I've been listening. I'm not going to say much. I think a lot has been covered. I've decided to prepare a brief presentation under the title. As you can see, I'm not going to read it. I'm just a little worried because I've been given, 10 minutes to run through. If the chair were to be generous with time, I would be in a position to sort of engage in all three aspects that I've highlighted as part of the presentation. But I see she's very much economical with the time. So I would respect that. The interest of the discussion I explored on three counts. Of course, this is divided into two. I'm just adding my voice. Part one, I'm just adding my voice to the discussion. And then the last part, I'll just make a passing mention of the projects that talk to, community engagement within this faculty, that is arts and humanities. Number one, the idea is to sort of examine social justice education and its principles from the perspective of distributive justice. This is work in progress. I'm not going to waste my time on that because of time. Two, I would also want to explore notions of meaningful engagement meaningfully, which is something that I've coined from the perspective of recognitive justice, which I find it quite interesting. And I'm putting emphasis on this point in that I view students as constituting a community. I think someone asked that question as to who should we consider as constituting community. And I stand from that point to say students also constitute a community. And three, just some remarks, on what we should perceive as a listening institution and the extent to which our institutions should respond to a diverse and cultural pedagogies in relation to community engagement. I would want to kick off, citing Gale and Chanter's work, and I feel they sort of provide a convincing position here. I quote, "In the context of higher education for the masses, recognitive justice requires a deeper understanding of the knowledges, values, and understanding that all students bring to the university. And this necessarily implies creating spaces for them, not simply creating more places," close quote. If we understand it more broadly, widening students' participation can no longer be defined in terms of massification. We all know that by now, with all the developments, in recent times. Neither can it be defined by espousing diversity of current knowledge as the absolute truth and a sole determining factor of our societal arrangement. That time has come to an end. Hence, I would want to propose and add my voice to the debate, meaningful engagement meaningfully, which I suppose relates to an integrated and mutually inclusive approach in terms of understanding societal building blocks and systems. And I take my inspiration on this from the civic engagement, which is driven by Lerner et al. Now, the important elements that are linked to meaningful engagement meaningfully are voice discourse. I think Prof. Chetty made mention of that issue. And of course, listening universities, and that would come out as I move. I would want you to take a closer look at this framework, which I took great care in putting together in the last couple of days as I was conceptualizing the notion of engagement from a student perspective. And I think this for me is very critical if one looks at the intersections and the mutual beneficiaries that may exist and possible a better society or a better world if one were to take this to the next level. I'll give you a moment to take a closer look and then I'll move to the next slide. Okay, so there are fundamental drivers behind this notion that is meaningful engagement meaningfully, and all are aimed at social justice orientation outcomes, precisely recognitive justice, as I mentioned earlier. And their connections, links, actually link can be outlined as follows. If you look at community from the framework, there are linkages between informal education, where at a very young age we get socialized, and tying up with formal education that comes with basic education as we know it. You move to the next level, and that would be the university, represented by a professor or an academic, rubbing shoulders with students, issues relating to curriculum development, whether students are part of that or not, that's out of the question. But it represents the second layer, which I find it very interesting, but not knowing, how far do we go in terms of giving voice to the voiceless, in terms of recognitive justice in that space. Students going back after fulfilling the requirements of their programs to the community to plow back, are they in a state of readiness to do that? Especially if we don't really take community engagement and scholarship of engagement seriously as academics. Hence, one will say more or a little bit about intellectuals who are brave enough to be transformative, and that is our task. An account of one or two of these components and the extent to which they relate to meaningful engagement meaningfully is also indicated. For example, especially if we take care and we are serious about the notions of scholarship of engagement, we would sort of push the agenda, and as Hackman points out, focusing on information from multiple non-dominant perspective as part of critical pedagogy for our students. Decentering students' analytical frame and opening their minds to a broader range of experiences, especially if we're serious about being transformative as intellectuals. Analyzing the effects of power and oppression as part of the pedagogy and our practice. Inquiring into what alternative exists with respect to the current dominant view of reality of issues. Now, if these form part of our package as practicing academics, as university teachers, it goes without saying that the learning spaces and pedagogies must create or should create a conducive environment, as well as providing rich opportunities for the process of critical thinking to blossom and grow in a respectful and liberating fashion. And I think this view draws much from Paulo Freire, who's sort of advocating critical pedagogy. Now, the big question that we may have to ask, are we ready as a university to become a listening university and take up the challenge of our structural makeup to cater for what Prof. Lovak suggests, that is the partnership with community and industry possible, and become transformative academics or intellectuals who are very serious about the role and the voice discourse as we know it from the student's perspective. Now, this is a question which we may have to grapple with as part of our debate over the 3 days. Now, this is also an observation coming from Remenyi, suggesting that, I quote, the degree of engagement which students experience with the material they are being taught is directly related to how individuals perceive its utility. In fact, there are often big differences between how the relevance of course content is presented to students, close quote. Now, if we understand it in this way, one can see the disconnect that speaks volumes, and let alone the institutional readiness to listen and take up the challenge in terms of community engagement. Not to say we're not progressive, but there are gaps here and there. To sum it up, the onus is more on the mainstream academic workforce, what some refer to it as transformative intellectuals who are keen on this, and the extent to which they are willing to facilitate and support students' voice discourse and the meaningful engagement meaningfully. And of course, part of the role that the university must play is to mirror the change that is seen in society. It begins to then say a future university must be a trustworthy partner with society or a community. Now, the spin-offs with that collaborative relationship are huge. You can begin to see some of these developmental initiatives coming from our faculty here, the Create More initiative,
Sorry,
which
Prof.
is
1 minute left.
Thank you, which is now beginning to spread its wings to the community out there, especially once it's completed. Now, you're looking at the curriculum renewal project, which is well underway. We should be able to release our call for chapters, which is going to be a big project going forward, interrogating issues of knowledge, curriculum, and pedagogy. The residency program that has produced 3 albums of African jazz is another interesting project within CHR. The theater project featuring so many activities, but also with the recent Charlotte Maxeke and the intellectual itinerary of anti-apartheid in South Africa and beyond. And lastly, the Berrydale Reconciliation Day Parade project, which looks after training and workshops and also being driven by artists in residence. Thank you very much.